Right, let's talk about something as American as apple pie, or more accurately, as American as arguing about the designated hitter rule. It's the Pledge of Allegiance. Picture this, you're 5 years old, you've just figured out that paste is not, in fact, a food group, and a teacher asks you to stand up, put your hand over your heart, and recite a solemn oath to a piece of fabric. You don't know what allegiance means. You probably think indivisible is a type of superhero. But you do it. Every single day, from kindergarten until you're old enough to legally drive the car you'll be too broke to afford. This is the American school experience. A daily ritual that becomes as automatic as breathing. This isn't just a quaint little classroom tradition, it's a meticulously designed system. The goal is to instill a sense of national pride and unity from a very, very early age. We are taught to stand in unison, speak in unison, and face the flag in unison. It's a powerful image, isn't it? A room full of children, their voices merging into one, promising loyalty to a nation they've barely begun to understand. It's presented as the ultimate act of being a good citizen. But here's a thought. Is the best way to create good citizens by teaching them to repeat words without thinking, or by teaching them to think about the words they're being asked to repeat? It's a subtle, yet profound, difference. The sheer repetition is the genius of it. Do something enough times, and it seeps into your bones. It becomes a part of you. The Pledge of Allegiance is drilled into young minds before they develop the critical thinking skills to analyze what they're saying. By the time they're teenagers, the words are muscle memory. They've been saying them for over a decade. The act itself feels more important than the meaning behind it. It's a morning warm-up, a mental stretch before diving into algebra or the history of ancient civilizations. But what if that warm-up is actually programming us to accept a certain version of reality? A version that might not be entirely accurate? And let's be honest, the social pressure is immense. Imagine being the one kid who decides not to stand. The stares, the whispers, the potential trip to the principal's office. It's far easier to just go with the flow, to stand up, mumble the words, and sit back down. This compliance is framed as respect, but it often stems from a desire to avoid trouble. We are conditioned to conform, to participate in this collective performance of patriotism without ever stopping to read the script. This daily ceremony is the first and most consistent lesson in civic duty that American children receive, and its influence is far more powerful than we often care to admit. So we've established that millions of kids recite this thing every day. But what are they actually pledging? Let's break it down, shall we? It's like looking at the terms and conditions of an app you've been using for years. I pledge allegiance. Right there, that's a big one. Allegiance means loyalty, a deep commitment. You're not just promising to be friends with the flag, you're promising to be loyal to the republic for which it stands. A republic, by the way, is a system where power is held by the people and their elected representatives. It's a promise to a system of government, a system we are told is one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, those last few words are the real headline act. Liberty and justice for all. That is a massive, spectacular promise. It's the kind of promise you'd see in a movie trailer for a utopian sci-fi blockbuster. Liberty, the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions, and justice, the quality of being fair and reasonable. For all. Not for some, not for the people who can afford it, not for people who look a certain way, but for every single person. This is the core sales pitch of the American dream, beautifully packaged in a neat 31-word pledge. It's aspirational, it's noble, and it sounds absolutely fantastic. The phrase, one nation, is also doing a lot of heavy lifting here. It suggests a unified, cohesive country where everyone is on the same team, working towards the same goals. Indivisible reinforces this idea, hammering home the point that we cannot be broken apart. This language was, of course, born out of the ashes of the Civil War, a time when the nation was quite literally divided. The pledge serves as a constant reminder of that ideal, a single, unbreakable entity. It's a beautiful thought, the idea that despite our differences, we are all part of one big, happy, indivisible family. But as with any family, you have to wonder if everyone gets treated the same at the dinner table. And then, there's the most controversial addition, under God. These two words weren't even in the original pledge. They were squeezed in during the 1950s at the height of the Cold War to draw a sharp line between God-fearing America and the godless communists. So the pledge we say today is not the one its author, Francis Bellamy, originally wrote. It was amended to include a religious declaration tying national identity to a belief in a higher power. This immediately raises questions for those who don't subscribe to a monotheistic faith, or any faith at all. Are they somehow less American? It's a small phrase with enormous implications for a nation that prides itself on religious freedom. Let's zero in on the grand finale of the pledge, with liberty and justice for all. It's the mic drop moment. The phrase that is supposed to make every American heart swell with pride. And it should. In principle, it's a magnificent ideal. But here's the uncomfortable part we need to talk about. The massive gap between the promise and the reality. Is justice in America truly for all? Or is it more like a subscription service where the premium features are only available to those who can pay the hefty fee? The evidence, unfortunately, suggests that the scales of justice are often tipped by the weight of wealth and influence. Consider the simple yet profound difference in how the justice system treats the rich and the poor. If an ordinary citizen is arrested, they might rely on an overworked and underfunded public defender. Their case becomes one of a massive pile on someone's desk. They might be encouraged to take a plea deal, regardless of their guilt, just to get the process over with. Now picture a wealthy individual in the same situation. They can afford a dream team of high-powered attorneys who can dedicate months, or even years, to finding every possible loophole, challenging every piece of evidence, and crafting a narrative that paints their client in the most favorable light. It's not a fair fight, it's a different sport altogether. This isn't just about lawyers either, it's about the entire system. Take sentencing, for instance. We've seen countless examples of affluent individuals, from celebrities to corporate executives, receiving sentences that feel more like a slap on the wrist than a genuine punishment for their crimes. A judge might sentence a wealthy person convicted of financial fraud to house arrest in their multi-million-dollar mansion, citing their contributions to the community. Meanwhile, a person from a low-income neighborhood might receive a harsh prison sentence for a much less severe offense because the system views them as less valuable or more of a threat. That doesn't sound like justice for all. It sounds like justice for some. The truth is, power and privilege create a protective bubble. They grant access to resources, connections, and a level of deference from the system that ordinary people simply do not have. This is the hidden truth that the Pledge of Allegiance papers over. By having children recite justice for all every morning, we are teaching them a comforting lie. We are telling them that the system is inherently fair, that the playing field is level. This makes it much harder for them to recognize and challenge the deep-seated inequalities that exist. The promise is beautiful, but the reality is a messy, complicated, and often deeply unjust affair that we need to be honest about. To really understand this, let's move beyond hypotheticals and look at the kind of stories that splash across our news feeds. Think about the concept of bail. In theory, it's a system to ensure someone shows up for their court date. In practice, it's often a system that punishes poverty. If a person without financial means is accused of a minor crime and can't afford a few $100s for bail, they can end up sitting in jail for weeks or months awaiting trial. They might lose their job, their housing, and even custody of their children, all before they've been convicted of anything. Their life is turned upside down simply because they are poor. Now contrast that with a high-profile case involving a wealthy executive or a celebrity. Let's say they're accused of a serious white-collar crime like embezzling millions of dollars. For them, a bail amount of, say, $1 million might be an inconvenience, but it's not an insurmountable barrier. They can pay it, or pay a bail bondsman, and walk free the same day. They get to sleep in their own bed, continue working with their legal team, and maintain a semblance of their normal life while their case proceeds. The principle of innocent until proven guilty seems to apply much more robustly when you have a healthy bank account. This disparity doesn't end with bail. It extends to the very nature of the crimes that are prosecuted. The justice system often directs immense resources toward prosecuting street-level crime, which disproportionately affects marginalized communities. Police departments are praised for cracking down on things like petty theft or drug possession. But what about corporate crime? What about when a company pollutes a town's water supply, or a bank engages in fraudulent practices that wreck the economy? The individuals responsible often hide behind complex corporate structures. The investigations are long, expensive, and the penalties, if they come at all, are often just fines that are a drop in the bucket for a massive corporation. This sends a clear and dangerous message. Some crimes are more criminal than others. Stealing a loaf of bread to feed your family can land you in jail. Stealing billions of dollars through sophisticated financial schemes might just land you a hefty severance package and a sternly worded letter from a regulator. This is the system that the Pledge of Allegiance asks us to honor. It asks us to believe in justice for all while we see with our own eyes that justice is a commodity, bought and sold like any other. It's a beautiful slogan for a product that frequently fails to deliver on its promise, especially for those who need its protection the most. Right, let's circle back to those two little words that caused such a fuss, under God. As we mentioned, they were a Cold War-era addition, a political move to distinguish America from its atheist adversaries. But adding a religious element to a national pledge of loyalty is a bit like adding pineapple to a pizza. Some people love it, some people hate it, and a lot of people just don't think it belongs there in the first place. The United States Constitution is pretty clear on the whole separation of church and state thing, so compelling students in public schools to acknowledge a nation under God every morning feels, well, a little awkward, doesn't it? For millions of Americans who are not Christian, or who are atheists or agnostics, this part of the pledge can be alienating. It subtly implies that to be truly part of the one nation, you must subscribe to a particular religious worldview. It creates an us and them dynamic within the classroom. While students do have the legal right not to say the pledge, exercising that right can single them out and lead to ostracism. It forces a child to make a public declaration about their family's private beliefs, which is a heavy burden to place on a second grader who is still grappling with the concept of long division. Furthermore, invoking God gives the nation's actions a veneer of divine approval. It suggests that the country's policies and its system of government are not just man-made constructs, but are somehow blessed or ordained by a higher power. This can be a dangerous idea. It discourages dissent and critical examination. If you believe the nation is guided by a divine hand, you might be less likely to question its leaders or challenge its laws. Questioning the government becomes, in a way, questioning God's plan. This is a powerful tool for maintaining the status quo and suppressing calls for fundamental change. Ultimately, the inclusion of under God changes the pledge from a civic promise to a quasi-religious one. It blurs a critical line. A pledge to a republic and its ideals is one thing. A pledge that ties that republic to a specific theological concept is another entirely. It asks citizens to affirm a religious belief as part of their patriotic duty. This complicates the simple, secular promise of liberty and justice for all by adding a layer of religious conformity. It's a prime example of how the pledge has been molded over time to serve a political agenda, rather than to purely reflect the foundational principles of the nation it represents. Let's be brutally honest for a moment. The Pledge of Allegiance, in its modern-day application, is an absolutely brilliant piece of marketing. It's an advertisement for a product called American Exceptionalism, and it's played on a loop in front of a captive audience of children every single day. The best marketing doesn't just sell you a product, it sells you an idea, a feeling, an identity. The pledge sells the idea of a perfect, unified, and just nation. It creates an emotional connection to the flag and the state before a child even knows what a state is. It's branding, pure and simple. Think about how this works. By repeating the words "one nation," indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, we are not just stating an aspiration. We are being conditioned to believe it's a current reality. It's the fake it till you make it approach to nation building. The problem is, if you tell people over and over again that they live in a perfectly just system, they might start to believe you. This can create a population that is less inclined to see the flaws, less willing to listen to those who point out the injustices, and more resistant to the idea that significant change is needed. It's a form of societal gaslighting. This conditioning is incredibly effective because it starts so young. A child's brain is like a sponge, soaking up information and forming core beliefs about the world. When one of the first and most consistent messages they receive is that their country provides justice for all, that message becomes a foundational part of their worldview. Later in life, when they encounter evidence to the contrary, stories of systemic inequality, racial injustice, or political corruption, it can create a sense of cognitive dissonance. It's easier to dismiss the inconvenient evidence than to rebuild the entire foundation of what they've been taught to believe about their country. So, the pledge functions as a powerful tool for maintaining social and political order. It promotes a passive form of patriotism, one that is based on recitation, rather than active engagement. It encourages loyalty to symbols, rather than to principles. It fosters a belief in the inherent goodness of the system, which in turn protects that system from rigorous scrutiny. It's not necessarily a nefarious conspiracy, but it is a highly effective mechanism for shaping public consciousness and ensuring a baseline of compliance. It's the political equivalent of a catchy jingle that you can't get out of your head, even if you don't really like the product it's selling. The single most dangerous aspect of the daily pledge ritual is that it teaches us to ask why. Why are we standing? Why are we saying these specific words? Why this flag? Why every morning? The ceremony itself discourages questioning. It's presented as a non-negotiable part of the school day like fire drills or lunch breaks. By making it a routine, we strip it of its meaning and turn it into an act of blind obedience. And a society that values blind obedience over critical inquiry is a society that is vulnerable to manipulation and control. This is ground zero for learning how to follow orders without thinking. This habit of non-questioning, learned in the classroom, can extend into adulthood. If we are taught from a young age that certain institutions and symbols are beyond reproach, we may carry that deference with us throughout our lives. We might become less likely to question the actions of our government, to challenge the narratives presented by those in power, or to demand accountability from our leaders. We become compliant citizens rather than active participants in a democracy. A healthy democracy doesn't just need voters, it needs skeptics, critics, and people who are willing to ask the hard questions. Think of it this way. School is supposed to be a place where you learn how to think critically. In science class, you're taught to form a hypothesis and test it with evidence. In history class, you're encouraged to analyze primary sources and understand different perspectives. But then, every morning we have this one moment that is the complete opposite of that. It's a moment of pure, uncritical repetition. It sends a mixed message. It says, question everything, except this. This you just accept. This contradiction can be confusing for a young mind and can subtly undermine the very educational principles the school is supposed to uphold. The danger, then, is that the pledge can inadvertently become a lesson in authoritarianism. It teaches that conformity is a virtue, and that loyalty to the state is a duty that should not be questioned. This is a slippery slope. A government that can rely on the unquestioning loyalty of its citizens is a government that can get away with a lot. It is our ability to think for ourselves, to question authority, and to demand that our nation live up to its own ideals that truly makes a republic strong. Blindly pledging allegiance to a flag is easy. Actively working to create a nation worthy of that allegiance is the hard part. So, what's the takeaway here? Should we all just refuse to say the pledge and burn our tiny classroom flags? No, of course not. The point isn't to be contrarian for the sake of it. The point is to think. The most patriotic thing a person can do is not to blindly recite an oath, but to actively engage with what their country stands for, and to hold it accountable to its promises. Your brain is not a recording device designed to play back memorized scripts. It is a powerful tool for analysis, skepticism, and inquiry. Using it is not disrespectful. It's your fundamental responsibility as a citizen. For the young people reading this, it is absolutely crucial that you understand this. It is okay to question what you were taught. In fact, it is essential. Your teachers, your parents, your government, they are all fallible human beings and institutions. They can be wrong, they can have biases, they can present you with a version of the world that is incomplete or misleading. Your job is not to passively absorb everything you are told. Your job is to listen, to learn, and then to ask, is this true? Is this fair? Is there another side to this story? This process of questioning is not about cynicism, it's about intellectual honesty. It's about having the courage to look at the world as it is, not just as we're told it is. When you recite the pledge and you get to with liberty and justice for all, it's okay to think to yourself, is that really true for everyone I know, for everyone in my community, for everyone in this country? If the answer is no, then the next question is, why not? And what can be done about it? That is how progress happens. Progress is not born from mindless agreement, it is born from thoughtful dissent. Don't let anyone make you feel unpatriotic for asking tough questions. The people who have pushed America forward, have always been the ones who challenged the status quo. The civil rights activists, the suffragettes, the labor organizers, they were all people who looked at the promise of America and said, "You're not living up to it." They loved their country enough to demand that it be better. So the next time you're asked to stand for the pledge, think about the words. Question them, investigate them. That is your right, and more importantly, it is your power. In the end, this isn't really about a 31-word oath, it's about what lies beneath it. The Pledge of Allegiance is a symbol, and like any symbol, its meaning is not fixed. It can be a tool for indoctrination, or it can be a catalyst for critical thought. The choice is ours. The true measure of a citizen is not their ability to recite a pledge from memory, but their willingness to grapple with the complex, messy, and often contradictory truths of their nation. It's about recognizing the gap between our ideals and our reality, and then having the courage to try and close that gap. A real Pledge of Allegiance isn't to a piece of cloth. A flag is just fabric. A real pledge is to the principles that the flag is supposed to represent: liberty, equality, and justice. And pledging allegiance to principles means you have to be willing to call out injustice when you see it, even when it's being committed by the very institutions the flag represents. It means understanding that patriotism is not about blind loyalty, it's about a deep and abiding commitment to making the nation better for everyone, not just for a privileged few. This commitment to truth is a responsibility that falls on everyone, regardless of their race, their background, or where they come from. The struggle for a more just society is not one person's fight, it's everyone's. When we see a system that provides a different brand of justice for the rich and the poor, we all have a duty to speak up. When we hear rhetoric that divides us, or see policies that harm the vulnerable, we all have a responsibility to push back. That is the work of a real republic carried out by active, engaged citizens. So, let's redefine our morning ritual. Instead of a pledge of blind faith, let's make it a daily pledge of critical inquiry. A pledge to seek the truth, to question power, and to hold our nation accountable to its highest ideals. Let's pledge to work for a country where liberty and justice for all is not just a phrase we say in classrooms, but a reality we live in our communities. That is a pledge worth making, and it's a pledge that requires no flag, no recitation, and no permission from anyone. It just requires us to think,